You're listening to the Be a Boss Coaching podcast. My name is Beatriz, and I am an entrepreneur and business coach. In this episode, I have the lovely pleasure of speaking with Adriana Rodriguez, aka Adri Rodriguez. Adri is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a proud Salvadorian American. As a first generation Latinx, eldest daughter, and queer femme, Adriana brings a unique perspective to her work, combining her lived experiences with 19 years of expertise in mental health education and nonprofit management and direct service. Adriana is the founder of Adriana Rodriguez Therapy and Wellness, and she is the host of the podcast Entre Tías y Amiguis, which creates space for real conversations about adulting, identity, and liberation. Beyond therapy, Adriana is an educator, adjunct professor, and community builder dedicated to the dismantling of systemic oppression and reclaiming joy. She brings her passion for racial healing into every space she enters, always centering liberation, creativity, and purpose. Adriana is a wife, tia, dog, and plant mom, and a champion for all who seek to understand themselves more deeply and authentically. I'm excited for you to listen to Adriana's story and how she was able to build a successful private practice. Enjoy the show. Hey, y'all, and welcome to season 3 of the Be a Boss Coaching podcast. My name is Beatriz. I'm a business and entrepreneur coach, and I'm the founder of Be a Boss Coaching. In this podcast season, I am thrilled to have a brand new lineup of guests from diverse fields, each bringing their own unique products and services to the table. Not only are we featuring inspiring business entrepreneurs and their stories, but we'll also dive into the skills and innovations that are integral in building a thriving business. Get ready for topics that are essential for your entrepreneurial journey. In this season, we'll cover everything from healing to AI, to creativity, to building a private practice. Stay tuned and don't forget to visit beabosscoaching.com, where you can read our other blogs, listen to our other podcast episodes, and join our newsletter, where you'll find out about new services and offers and exclusive discounts and so much more. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you, Adri, for being here. I am so excited. Like I said, I just finished talking to you that I just set up this brand new setup with my camera, so I feel a little jittery. I don't know what's gonna happen. But how are you?
I'm
so
good.
glad
I'm
that
good. I'm
you're
really
here.
excited. I was thinking, I was sharing with my wife that I have been interviewed as a therapist many times, as a some things about my own history, but never about my business. So this is a first for me to talk about just my business, and I'm really excited for that just kind of lens. So thank you so much for having me.
Yes, me too. I'm very excited for you to share your journey as a clinical practitioner, as a business owner, entrepreneur. But before we do all that, I want to give you some space to introduce yourself.
So let me see. So I'm Adri Rodriguez, short for Adriana. I'm kind of in this transition of a name, so something shorter. So I'm going by Adri. And my pronouns are she, her, hers, ella. I am a queer Salvadorian native. I was born and raised in El Salvador until I was 16. So I came to the U.S. At the end of 10th grade. So 2 months of 10th grade, and then went on to finish high school here. Went to Sac State. I live in Sacramento, Northern California. So I went to the university locally here. And so I'm a first gen through and through, but I hear that my generation is a 1.5 gen because it's I have both the experiences of being an immigrant. So many times I get along with a lot of the people that are a little bit older, the generation of maybe our parents, because I've had some of those immigrant experiences. And also kind of I feel my life has been this bridge of just kind of the two worlds very clearly, just because I've had to navigate it. And so a lot of first granddaughter on my dad's side, first eldest daughter in my family, first son to go to college, first son to do everything, business owner. So there are a lot of things about my experiences that kind of always have that lens. I'm a multipreneur. I have been a photographer. I've had a photography business that I'm semi-retired from, but my clients keep asking me to come back out of retirement. So maybe this fall I'll be coming back. And multipreneur because I not only do have my private practice, I'm also a professor, my photography business. I also do consulting around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging and mental health. So I'm a little bit of I call myself a jack of all trades and like a master of every single one. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And so I have a very curious mind. I want to learn everything. I'm a serial DIYer. So like, that's just like a little bit about me.
I love it. I love it. I identify with wanting to do so many things all the time because when I was in high school, I just remembering trying out, like, I did softball, I did dance, I did volleyball. And I have always been that way where if anything piques my interest, I want to do it. I just want to try it out, see what it's like. And podcasting is actually one of those activities that I've always wanted to try. And I'm so happy that I finally have gotten to try it. And it's actually a passion, I would say. I even love editing. It can be tedious, I will say, but I even love editing. But I all of that to say, I love that you identify as a jack of all trades, master of all of them, because it is possible to be good at the things that you love, right? To be good at multiple things and not just stick to one thing and be strict with that. So thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so I would like you to go a little bit into your business and your private practice because I think that it can feel a little bit unclear as to when you're a private practitioner, clinical practitioners, like you have those skills, right? Like you have the skills of being I'm a social worker, you're a licensed marriage and family therapist. I see them as cousins in the field of mental health. And I do want to get into the details of like how that got started, but also the logistical things, because I realize that there's some things that we need to do as a clinical practitioner that may not be something that as a regular business owner does not need to do. But we'll get into that. But you did identify and said that you are a jack of all trades, master of all of them. So can you say more about how you came to accept that as part of who you are?
I've always been a multi-interested, multi-passionate sort of person, right? And I've struggled, I think, through the years as to like how to find a lane. One fun fact about me is that I actually started undergrad as a computer engineering major. So I've gone from computer engineering to being a therapist.
Shut up.
Yeah, I was actually like pretty far into being an undergrad, about to declare like to go into upper division courses, calculus, all the sciences and all the things. And it just so happened that when I was taking a lot of the engineering classes, like socially, it wasn't like a good match for me. Like I could not stand going into this quiet rooms where everybody was like in their computers coding. And I remember very specifically this one memory when I walked into the computer lab, because back in my day, we had computer labs because not all of us had laptops. And I walked in and you could just hear the teclas like, and it was so dead and it was so dark. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I am going to die. Like this is just way too quiet. And so then that same day, along in that journey, I started taking a lot of sociology classes because I had grown up pretty conservative. I had grown up in like a very strict religion as a Jehovah's Witness. And so when I got to college, it was one of my first times that I had like the opportunity to ask all kinds of questions, to meet all kinds of people, to take all kinds of classes. And I found that through sociology, I was not only like taking like classes, right, but I also got to like chat about all these subs that I had and all these questions that I had, and I would be writing papers. And so I had this like competing sort of interest of like the very logical, very technical things that I love. I mean, like you give me a computer, a mic, like anything now that I'm podcasting, it's just like, give me technical stuff, I'll figure it out. Like it's like quick. But there's this other part of me that just loves people and just loves being in like flow and like hanging out and like being super social. And so I couldn't find myself within the road that I had picked to become a computer engineer. And I started just like what it would be like to go into more like social justice, social services, like nonprofit type of work. But I really had no clue of what that meant because I was still pretty like a new immigrant. I had only been in the United States like 4 or 5 years at that point. So I was still like just even getting to know how things work here. And at some point I just made a decision that, the computer engineering wasn't going to be for me. And I think that was the first time that I was like, I need to follow what feels right for me because I can do the things that I have in front of me. If I set a goal, I will get it done. Like whether it's hard or it's not hard, if that's the goal, I will do it. But it was the first time that I was about, what do I want to do? What do I love? And so from there, I feel like it has opened up kind of like this career that even as an MFT, when I finished my MFT, I went into program development, grant writing, managing millions of dollars for, one of the local school districts here in Sacramento. And so it's like, I can be good at a lot of things. And it's more about like what I'm interested in the moment. And so I've surrendered this idea that like you can only be be good at one thing. I want to be good at everything that I do. A little bit maybe is recovering of perfectionism that has left me with still like really high standards, but a lot of excitement about learning and about doing things really well. I love when I have a goal, when I have a thing, especially something tangible, and then like I can envision it and then kind of take all the steps to get it to where it needs to be. Like that just really excites me. And so I just have high standards for everything that I do. And I know that whatever interest I have, it will be done well, And how I don't quite know always, but like
Yeah.
somehow I get there.
I love it. I love it. I love it. You know why? Because the reason why I chose social work for myself was also because I felt that it was such a
Uh-huh.
versatile field. Because you could go into mental health, you could go and be with people, talk with people, around people, but you could also be in a very technical job or role as well, where you're managing grants, you're managing programs, be a
Uh-huh.
nonprofit executive director, or you could go into philanthropy or be in working for a corporation. And there's just so many different. For me, I saw it as this field where it was so flexible, so versatile, and it's not just social services like child welfare type of
Uh-huh.
um, field, right? So that's why I identified that with that a lot too. And that is so awesome that you were into computer engineering. Just for my own selfish reasons, I wish you would have stayed in computer engineering because there's not enough women in computer engineering, right? There needs to be more women in computer science, computer engineering, because computer science and coding and like technology is what's really driving a lot of business and just the future forward, I believe. But that's why I believe that. But anyway, either way, I am so glad that you were able to find something that you feel called to feel and that you really took the time to reflect on what it is that I want, right? I could be really good at so many things, but what is it
Mhm.
that I want for for me? So that is awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into marriage and family therapy specifically? Did you ever consider social work by any chance?
So this is also kind of like a little bit of a funny story, right? Of just like, I'm like a person that is like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Like, sure, let's do it, right? Like, I'll try it once. And in fact, I have a couple of friends. I'll be like, the thing about Adri is that she'll try something at least once. And then if it's not for her, she'll drop it. But like, if it is for her, then she'll really go hard at it, right? And so when I switched from computer engineering, I went into the sociology and I love the topics. I love the conversations. I love the papers. But I didn't really think about like, what does one do for a living when you graduate with a sociology undergrad? Like, it hadn't even occurred in my mind. Like, you'd get a job, right? And I'm an immigrant. I'm just like, you come here, you get a college degree, and then you get a job. Like, it just seemed that simple. So I graduated from undergrad and I'm about to graduate from undergrad and I'm like, what the heck do people with sociology degrees do? So I remember I went to monster.com and I started putting in like to see like the jobs that you could do with sociology. And then I ended up finding a job at a nonprofit called El Hogar that is a regional support center for like people with mental health issues. And so then they had a bilingual case manager position, and the bilingual case manager position was basically like helping people allocate resources, housing, transportation. And I was like, I can do all that. Like, it doesn't seem hard, it seems really interesting. So I get to this job and I'm just like, working, and they give me a seniors group for arts and crafts. And so it was like this like weekly group where like the seniors in the community, everybody that came to the clinic could come. And then se empezaron a pasar la voz. They're like, ahí está una muchacha del Salvador, and like she's like Salvadorian, she speaks Spanish. Vénganse al grupo, ella bien platica y todo, right? Like she has like all this like we'll be crocheting and just like chit chatting, and I'm just like literally chilling. Like this is like the funnest thing. And then after I got to write notes, it was like this is what we did, but like nothing of that seemed like felt hard to me, right? And so I started having like, I went from like having 2, 3 people to having like 20 people come to my group. And we're literally crocheting, doing arts and crafts. And in the meanwhile, right, like I hadn't even really realized the power of healing, of coming together as a community, and how these folks had like really found the space that I was like putting together as both as an immigrant, as a Spanish speaker, but also as a person that knew how to navigate the system, the mental health system that they were dealing with. I just became like this like resourceful person, right? And so one of my friends is applying for grad school, starts applying for grad school. And my boss is like having a conversation with her. And I'm just there and I'm like, oh, yeah, like one day I'll go to grad school. They're like, well, what are you waiting for? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, how does one go to grad school? Like, to be like that honest, like I had only been in the United States like 6 years at this point, because I have to remind myself, like, why didn't I know all these things? Like, why didn't they feel like the life that I had thought I was going to have in El Salvador? Like, there was like this whole transition of like, what is going to be my life here in the States? So then the application deadline was coming up like in November or something like that. It was like a month away. And there was a coworker there and 2 of my bosses, and they start having a conversation about how I should go to grad school and why I should go to grad school, that I should apply, and that they would all have my back, the right letters for me. And so I just thought it was a good idea. I just thought it was a good idea to apply to grad school. And then, like,
Yeah,
2 months
for
later, I
sure.
was like in a graduate program, and I had no idea what I was in for. I had no idea, like, really what therapy was, what the field was. I just was holding on to that feeling of running that group with like todos los viejitos de la comunidad, y, like que me querían tanto, that they would like come and like
Yeah.
platicar and like tell me what was going on with them. And I was like, if this is if this is the educational path that gets me to do that, like that feeling of like being with people, but being of help, being generous with your time, because it just feels like we're moving so fast through the world that like being a therapist is like really kind of like a job of generosity, where you're just like, I'll sit with you for an hour. Like who does that, right? Like nowadays, like who has time for that type of relationship? And so
Yeah.
how I ended up in grad school was a little bit just kind of how I ended up in sociology. You know, I was just kind of like, this seems really good. Seems like a
Mhm.
good fit to me. I like it. I'm good at it. I'm learning about myself, and we'll see what happens. And so it's not a very fancy story, more than like a funny one, because I just don't know, like, some just have like the goal, the
Yeah.
audacity that I have of just saying like, you know what, go to grad school, like it's cool. Like I'll
Come
open a
on.
business. Like, well, and then here I am doing like this amazing things, you know. So it's kind of hard to believe sometimes that the process to me has felt that easy. But I really think when I stay with it now, with knowing what I know, is that I have always been good at following like my gut feeling, my intuition, and I have been responsive to that feeling
Mm.
of like, I know what I should be doing. I know what is
Yeah.
wanted of me, but what feels good to me. And before I knew to call it like intuition and all of that, like I just kind of knew in my heart what would be like a good fit for my life.
Yeah. That sounds so good. I wish I had the same intuition. Sometimes I feel I overthink everything and I'm like, "Oh, ¿qué voy a hacer? Do I go over here? Do I go over there?" I don't know. But I love I sense this firing you. Like you just like you there's always a fire in you that is ready to like take on the world and just really wants to be around a community. And the fact that you started this group and it got bigger and bigger even before you went to grad school, because when I was in social work school, I actually worked when my internship was at a community center with a lot of viejitos around the community, right? And I had to create a program. And but that was my task. Like I had to create a program and I didn't know what to do, but when I hear your story, it's like it came natural to you almost like you wanted to be around people and like you really wanted to be in community and people really resonated with you and who you are as a person. And it came to be. And so the fact that that came so naturally, I think it speaks to the fact that as a LMFT, that is a natural like career for you.
I feel like the field chose me because I
Yeah.
hear sometimes my colleagues, it's like, oh yeah, when I was like 12, I went to a therapist and the therapist was like my inspiration, or so and so, like my parent or my uncle, my auntie, they were therapists. And I'm just like, I am the first therapist that I've ever known. Like I did not know anybody else that was
Yeah.
doing that until like I got into the field, until I started having coworkers. And that's like a big part of being first gen, right? That I think like that intuition part, sometimes like the experience of being first gen is like, are we like not following ourselves because we don't hear it, like because it's not there? Or is this doubt about the direction that we're choosing just like really coded by the experience of not having anyone that is living a life like you are, you know? And I think, you know, like
Right.
when I hear the experiences of other my friends are therapists, right? Like generally their story has to do that they met a therapist earlier in their life, whether family member or their own therapist, right? And here I am, this immigrant girl, like terapia, like ¿qué es eso, right? Like even to this day, like a lot of stigma, right, still exists about it. And to me, it was just like one of those things of like, I just want to help people. And I think that was like the naive. And I hear a lot that like when I talk to my mentees or my students, right? It's like, I just want to help people. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, you don't even understand. Like, in this effort to help people, you end up like doing so much work on yourself. And sometimes we're like not even prepared for it. And so the field did take me by surprise, but I literally feel like I was chosen for this. Like, this is what I love to do, what I'm good at. Um, I get to help people, but I also have learned so much in the process of becoming a therapist and being a therapist over the years. The biggest gift of it all is just how much I've gotten to know myself and how much I've grown because I became a therapist.
Yeah. It's a wonderful journey to hear. And it everybody has very unique journeys, but I do agree that a lot of folks go into the service field and mental health because there's they want to give back, right? Maybe like they've gone through their like I know for me in particular, I remember in high school saying that I wanted to be a child psychologist, but I didn't, and that was the most language I ever had around mental health. I didn't know social workers
Mhm.
existed. I didn't know marriage and family therapists existed. I just knew psychology existed, psychologists, and that there was such thing as
Mhm.
child psychologists. And but it took me into a different journey of in my path, and in my healing as well. So there's a lot that I think going into the service field, it's about healing for you and wanting to heal
Mhm.
with others as well. So I agree. Awesome. Okay. So I want to transition into the details of starting your own private practice. I know when we had talked prior to this, you had mentioned that you were working for the school district, and there's a lot of feelings that were bubbling up for you during that time. And it was during the pandemic, but I'd like to if you could say a little bit about that and what that transition was like going from working
Mhm.
for a system essentially like an education system to working
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
yourself.
So I finished grad school back in '09. I finished my hours in 2012, and then my placement where I had gotten my hours was really traumatic. Any clinician in training will tell you that
Mm,
when you're a young clinician, you usually tend to get the hardest clients, the hardest cases with the hardest caseload. And especially when you're bilingual, bicultural,
yeah.
you know, you end up working with a lot of people that look like you, that feel like your family, that feel like your tias, your moms, or like some of the even things that you're going through yourself. And so I got burnt out from the field. I was just like, I love this. I'm really good at it, but I'm burnt out. I had a case that like literally had ripped my heart apart with like a little kiddo. And I was like, I finished my hours, I'll take my exams. And I took 2 years to take my exams just because I was like, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. Like, I don't know. So
Yeah.
I ended up
Yeah.
running a group home in San Francisco when I was living over there. And it was just kind of like taking a break. I needed a break from mental health and did a lot of program management and run this like beautiful, beautiful program. That program ended up closing down because of funding. And so then I ended up coming to Sacramento. And I had the option, like basically like the two roads, right? Do I stay in this in the field like of mental health? Do I go back? I've taken like a year and a half break at this point. Like, do I go back or do I go and to do something else? And it just so happened that the opportunity to come to the school district to do program development for youth development. So for after school programs, summer programs, which is kind of what I had done as a job during undergrad. I used to run summer programs and take kids to the pools and go on field trips to the zoo and things like that. So I'm like, oh, this sounds like a great job. Like I'm not ready to go back to mental health. And plus, the pay was terrible because I was still an associate and just was short of taking the exam, my last exam, but I had to like kind of decide. So I'm working in youth development for about 4 years, and I start getting into the place of just like, okay, is this a field that I'm gonna stay in because positions are coming up? Like, am I gonna get to be promoted, right? And the career path was to one day become the director of the department that I was working in. I mean, like, why not, right? Like, this is the thing that you do naturally. You go up the ladder. And then the mental health department at the school district found out that I was a licensed therapist, and they were like, "Time out! Like, why are you working in youth development, writing grants, and doing programs, and not here doing mental health?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, mental health is really hard." So then I ended up transitioning to work with them to kind of get my feet back into doing mental health. And then the same thing after 3 years, it's just kind of like, okay, I'm really good at this. So do I go and now start promoting up, right, to become the director then on this new program? Like, because I could see myself like being like really good at the people management, the money management, the systems management. Like, I'm very good at it. But somehow, like the things that used to be really important to me, like around titles, around like, oh, being like the director, like those things started having a lot less meaning to me because I started getting closer and closer to see how bureaucratic, systems are. I think at that point it was when where like the idealization that we just do this work to help really kind of hit the reality that your ability to help is limited by the constrictions of the system that you're in, right? Like you can help all you want, you can be creative all you want, but ultimately, what are the grants want from you? What is the funding expecting from your job? Are you meeting outcomes? Are you doing quality assurance? Are you doing all these things? And I just felt that being in all of those constrictions was really kind of eating away the soul of like the work and like what I really like to do. I kept myself busy doing work with kids, supervise interns, run student support centers, things like that, which was still really fulfilling. But if I wanted to move up, I was actually going to have to be leaving all of that and move into just like purely bureaucratic roles. So that's when 2020 hit, and I was at a middle school with 800 kids. And so the school shuts down from a Friday till Monday. And we go into this frantic, like, where are the kids? Do they have laptops? Do they have food? Do they have paper to like write? Like, how are we going to put these classrooms? And basically from like March, April, May, June of like that first part of the pandemic, we were out and about, like trying to find kids, trying to connect, trying to get them their laptops and all this stuff. And that was really anxiety provoking because I do have also some health issues that it was just like, do I pick my health? I was really scared about with COVID, but also, we had to do the work of finding the kids. And so that was kind of like the first, like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if this is for me. I had started private practice in 2018, just like one night a week. And because I had the model of my photography, of how I work with photography, the business part of it, I started building my private practice just in case, just in case. Pero ya me conozco, like anytime that I'm like, just in case, like I already know that this is going to be full on. So once 2020 hit, I had been in private practice like a year-ish, and only seeing like 3 clients. And so one of the things that happened when the pandemic hit with my job is that I used to be dead by the end of the day, because you're talking about 800 kids constantly, Mr. Rodriguez over here, walkie talkie, come in here, come and do this. All they interrupted. And so once we settled into our school year, I had time at night, because I wasn't like exhausted like I was, because the peopling is really what was exhausting for me, not necessarily work. So I kind of set it in mind that
Right.
whatever money I was making from the private practice, it was just going to be cushion for just in case I made the decision of leaving my job. It's like I wasn't feeling it. So I set like a money goal that first year of working in the evenings. I talked to my wife and I was like, hey, like I'm gonna go from working one evening a week into 2 evenings a week, 3 evenings a week, maybe 4 evenings a week. And so now I was working from Monday through Thursday every night, seeing like 2 to 3 people. And so I was saving all that money. And by the next year, when we were supposed to we came back to the schools the next March 2021, it was again another just like bureaucratic nightmare, being told what to do, like just having to follow protocols and rules that often didn't make sense in terms of like the work and how the work, in my opinion, could be done more effectively to support the students. And that's kind of when I had my realization of just like, why am I continuing to push against a system that it is so rigid and it is so established by the powers that be that are way higher than me. And this dream that I had of just like being able to be creative and construct the work in a way that I knew would be best for the students, it just felt impossible to do. And so that summer, because I was an 11-month employee, that summer I already had probably at this point like 8 to 10 clients that I was seeing regularly. And then when July came, was my month off, I was like, okay, I'm going to hustle this month. And if I get a full caseload, which my full caseload is like between 14 to 17 cases a week, so couples, adult families, or individuals, if I get full in this month of July, pues voy a tener que quitar mi trabajo. Like I can't have 2 jobs because then like, what am I going to do? And within
Yeah.
like a week and a half of opening up that I had this new private practice that I was going to be taking clients, I was full. And so August came and I
Yeah.
had to quit my job because then I didn't have 2 jobs. So that's a very long, short
Yeah.
story of how that all happened, the transition.
Oh, the transition. What I do love though, and if you could go into it, is that you you were like, okay, this month of July is well, we're hustling, and if I get to a full caseload, then we're gonna have to figure something out. But I feel like that was already your way of saying like this is gonna happen. Like this is gonna I'm gonna get a full caseload. And like somehow you already had it in your head that you were going to was going to be your new path. Um, I wonder, and I don't know if I'm sure that you've spoken with other clinicians and other marriage and family therapists or even social workers before, how common it is to get a full caseload in a short amount of time. Is that something that's common, or is it like, I wonder what the factors are where that can
I
happen.
don't think it is as common as they happened to me. And I think that the factor, like, I don't feel that it was
Mhm.
luck that what happened to me is that so I had a PR issue maybe like 7 years ago. I was at an event and then somebody was like talking to me about photography and they were like, da da da. And I was just like, oh no, like I'm not a full time photographer. I'm just like, this is my side gig. And they were like, wait, like everybody knows Adri Rodriguez photo. Like, what do you mean that's not your full time gig? Just like, no, I'm actually a therapist. And I remember from that day on, I was just like, I have a PR issue. Like nobody knows that I'm a therapist because my front facing social media persona was always photography. So I think that from that
Yeah.
moment on, I decided that I really wanted to kind of switch that and I really wanted people to see me be a therapist. And because of the work that I was doing in the community, I already had a lot of connections. I already have a pretty hefty reputation about like the good work that I do in the community. And so before even like the days of just like therapy influencers, right? Like we are like in a heavy therapy influencers now. I started just kind of posting and created a
Mhm.
social media account where I was just like talking about being a therapist, my experiences. And in my personal accounts, for example, I always post, I have space for clients, but if you can see this, I cannot be your therapist because we're friends. But if you know somebody that's
Mm-hmm.
looking for a therapist, like, please throw my name out there. And so I feel that even just that, like, I've done a
Mm.
lot of education in my own community about what is to be a therapist, what happens in therapy, who can be your therapist, why can't your friends be your therapist, and also like how to refer people to therapy. And so even as through the years, even as people were wanting to go to a therapist and they were like somebody in my close group, I have taken the time to be just like, let me walk you through the process. What insurance do you have? Let me go to my therapist groups. And so I think a combination of just like my own
Mm.
savviness of like running a business already with my photography, but also the community relationships that I built and the education that I spent doing, really not thinking that it was going to pay off this way. When I came back and when I kind of got to the point of like, okay, I need this full caseload, and I announced like I'm going to be taking more clients, people really were ready to like have my back and support me and put my name out there and share my stuff. And that really, I think, has been like the pivotal catalyst of my success, is that I, to this day, I host, I go to networking events. For example, I host now third Friday of the month, a therapist meetup. I believe in the power of community and the power of your name being like in people's mouth, right? Who's going to speak your name in the room that you're not in and bring you an opportunity? And I feel
Yeah.
so fortunate, but it's fortunate because the people that I have in my community are super generous, but also I've put in a lot of work in building this relationship. And so when the moments come
Yeah.
of like opening up, people like I know are gonna be super down for me. And so that July, that
Mm-hmm.
really is what happened. I posted, like I'm gonna be I kind of like announced I'm gonna be quitting my job. I'm gonna have private practice. And so send me everybody that you know if they're looking for a therapist. And somehow, some way,
Yeah.
the people found me. And but I
Yeah.
really think that it also has to do with all this work behind the scenes of building like a solid reputation as a clinician in the community, networking, and having, just also a financial plan. I had been saving and I was ready with like 6 months of savings
Mm-hmm.
for if and when I took this step. And so then that also allowed me to just kind of
Mm.
like, I'm going to go into this because I felt really safe in order to do it, to do the jump. It wasn't
Yeah.
just like a overnight thing. It was like I had been thinking about this, not with a direct business plan of how it was going to happen, but I was like, at some point, I think I'm going to get there. And so I had prepared myself financially and with all the network. I also
Mm.
had prepared my network for my transition.
Yeah. That speaks to the power of building relationships, right? And building that community field around you. And when it comes to private practice and being in the mental health field, whether in social work or marriage and family therapy or counseling or any sort of related fields, I feel like sometimes we can get, at least that was my experience, where I felt like I'm an introvert, so I feel very comfortable one on one with people, just like one on one. But in private practice, I think that there has to be a pivotal moment where you realize that actually, even though you may feel comfortable one on one with people and you do whatever you can to be one on one and in that comfort space, I think private practice brings out or making that decision to like branch out on your own brings out the need essentially to like start to build
Mhm.
community, to like start to not be afraid of like putting
Mhm.
yourself out there and really showing up and being like you said, you started a social media account and you were talking about what you do as a therapist and when you were talking about what you do around the community. And if that's in your head that maybe you might want to do that and want to build a caseload, then you have to start with
Yep.
letting people know, right? Letting people know what you
Yeah.
do and who you are and finding that
100%, because I
courage.
think that many people might think I'm ready to start a business, so then now I'm going to have all the clients come to me, right? And I really think in
Mm-hmm.
my formula,
Mm-hmm.
what has worked for me has been a buildup of a transition of both the financial security, but also like the network security, right? Of like the way that I have been able to show up and like build a lot of education. Because I think a lot of us in business sometimes expect that the consumer, that the customer, that the client will know how to come and find us. And actually, that is one thing that I have found. There's like a lot of people don't even know what kind of provider they're looking for, what kind of issue, what kind of specialization. And we kind of like in our own rooms, one-on-one with people, right? Like we become so focused on actually doing the work that I think we're forgetting that there is a need for client education about not only from like
Mm-hmm.
the consumer perspective, but also from like the stigma perspective, particularly in mental health, right? That in great majority, I'm working with queer, trans, Black, Indigenous people of color, cutie, BIPOC. Like that is like the majority of the people that I work with. And so the
Mm-hmm.
assumption that they knew exactly what a therapist that is working with that population does and how do they show up and all
Mm-hmm.
of these things, I think I saw it from the lens of like there was so much that I didn't know even as I became a therapist. Like when I got into private practice there was even more things
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't know. And so taking that time to like educate the client but also to get them to know me, right, to get my community to know me as a therapist, I think that has been like a really important step that like now I'm back into like, who's Adri as a therapist? Somebody needs a therapist, tell Adri, like, right? Like constantly people, I know that I'm popping up in them. And that is kind of like my goal. I want, if anybody here in Sacramento thinks of a queer femme, Latina, immigrant therapist, I want my name to be like the first thing that pops up. And I
Yes.
like that. Like I want to be that person.
Yeah, yeah. That's a lesson in branding. I want to say, like, you have really embraced that as like you, that's who you are. And now also people, like you said, queer femme, anyone who can think about these terms, I'm going to think about Audrey. When you think about branding in general or business in general, and you think about, for example, like a fizzy soda that's like dark, you think Coke, like I would like a soda. You are like, oh, give me a Coke, so you're like the Coke of like therapy for QT
I
BIPOC,
like that.
like the queer, like, yeah. Like first gen immigrant friend amiga, like that's in mental health and therapy, right? So I love that so much. Okay, so I know that we are wrapping up. We're getting down to I'm glad that you talked about your transition and then like how you came to build your private practice and your caseload. And are there any logistical things that you would like to emphasize that people should know prior to
Mm.
making that jump of going from perhaps they worked at, maybe they're working at a hospital as a therapist or anywhere, but now they're like really considering making that jump. Are there any logistical things that you wish someone would have told you, or that is very important that you should know when you're making
Mhm.
this decision and to go into private
Yeah,
practice?
I did a lot of research on how to run a business, not necessarily how to run a business as a therapist. And so I think the business acumen, your money avoidance will show up. You're not good at paperwork, that will show up. So like all the things of like running a business, it doesn't have to be how to run a therapy business. Ultimately, it's about how do you become responsible for managing your time, like having goals, um, going back to right like that money avoidance of being able to see like are you actually making money from the things that you're doing, are your offerings right like actually like the language that you're using is it matching what the community is looking for. There's a continuous improvement cycle that I feel like it is really important that we have as business owners, that we are ongoingly thinking about the quality and the ways to improve, not to criticize, not to say like, oh, what I'm doing is bad, but it's like, how do we continue to grow, right? Like this growth mindset that is like every step of the way, there is a new lesson to learn, a new way to like systemize something, a new way to make it easier, faster, based on the conversations I'm having with people, basing on like how the field is moving, but also learning from people who are not therapy business, like in the therapy business, but just like in the business realm, I think that to me, that has been really useful in terms of logistics, right? Like processes and things like that. When one of the big ones
Mm.
that I think I feel very proud of the processes that I went through for myself is that when I work at the school district, I was an 11-month employee. And so going into full-time private practice, one of the things that I grieved was like, am I really not going to have a month off in the summer? Like, that's going to really suck.
Mm.
I'm used to like having like
Yeah.
summers off. And so instead, what I did is that I used to work 210 days. That was our school year. So then I work about 210 days, but now instead of having a July off, I have Fridays off. I don't work on Fridays. So I created a money
Mm.
goal for the year, then divided that into the 210 days, picked how many, decided like how many vacation time I would take. Usually is a weekend Christmas, Thanksgiving, and then a weekend the spring. So I take about 3 weeks of vacation plus all the Fridays. And I divided the money goal by the days that I wanted to work a year, by the weeks that each month had, by the days that each month had. And then I created like mini goals for the day, for the week, for the month, and for the year. And that has been like one of
Wow.
my proudest sort of things that I like to share about how I run my business, because I used to think I was going to miss not having this month off. And so what I did is that I created a business that still gave me a business structure that still gave me the opportunity to make as much money as I was make in the district, but also like understanding what were my tiny goals for the day. Like, how much money do I need to make a day? So that turns into a week, that turns into a month, that then turns into a year. And that process, I think it is really, really important. And I wish more people were talking about how they're
Yeah.
setting up like their long vision for the year. You know, I produce a report, a quarterly report and a mid-year report to myself. Sometimes I like present it to my wife. It's like, the health of business. Let me put a PowerPoint for you, just because, you know, when I was working at the district, I had to do um, reviews, right? Of like, where are we at? And so I've replicated a lot of those systems that
Reports. Yeah.
when I used to manage other people's money, is how I manage my money in my business. And I'm having quarterly goals, 6-month goals, and then yearly goals. And it excites me to be that on top of my business, to be honest, it's like I am really excited to see progressing, and then also to build this space that if I don't meet a goal, it's not a point of like, oh, you know, like inner critic or judgmental, but it's just like, what happened there between what I thought was going to happen and what happened, and what are the lessons and the bridge between the 2 points, right? That are just like a fact. So that's also like another part of just kind
Yeah.
of how I've built my business, you know, from learning and bringing a lot of the lessons that I learned from managing public money into like managing the business sort of like well-being, particularly the financial one, because I find for me that when I'm financially stable, I can be more creative, I can be more relaxed, I can just dream and then take on other projects, because like my house is in order, right? Like, and so that is like my grounding sort
Mm-hmm.
of place of just like, business owners, do not avoid looking at your money, do not avoid thinking about your goals. Allow yourself to learn and grow from the moments where like you thought something was going to happen and didn't, rather than putting yourself down, and then give it another shot, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Adri, for sharing. I really love that breakdown down to like the day, you know. I think it really helps you just to see like your goal, like break down a big goal down to like a small goal, and it's a great example of how you can do that financially, but also not just financial goals, but just in general, just you have this big goal, well, how can you break that down into
Mhm.
smaller goals? So that it can build to this larger
Yeah,
goal
because the
that
financial goal turns into like how many days I want to work. Like ultimately, that was my big goal. Is like, how do I make the money I want to make, but only working at minimum, like right, or maximum the 210 days? Because if I work more than 210 days, then it would not make sense to leave my job. Like the whole point was to come and have a better quality of
yeah.
life. So that financial sort of aspect, it really translates more into the quality of life on like day to day, that I know what is it that what kind of effort do I
Mm,
need to put week to week and day to day to be able to feel like, oh, yep, Friday gets here and I get a 3-day weekend, you know, on most weeks. And I really like that for me, you know?
yeah. Well, I have so many more questions too, like about time. I feel like we need to do a part two and everything. But and if you're willing,
Yeah,
let's come
we'll do
on
it.
over to part two. We have to do it. But thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey, how you've come to be into private practice, and just also down to how you've built community and just everything that I hope can really help someone who's looking to build their own private practice can really take. And if they have any more questions that I want to ask you before we wrap, where can people find you? Where can people get in touch with you, follow you,
I'm a
all that
good
good stuff?
millennial, so find me on Instagram. That's where I live. It is my main social media.
Yeah.
And so my Instagram is Adri, ADRI_Rodriguez with a Z, wellness. And that's where I house like all the things that I do, including my new podcast that is going to be coming out, that you're going to be a guest in soon. And so all of these things that I do live on my Instagram mainly. For those of you that may be looking for a therapist or just kind of want to connect more and see what my business looks like, the kind of like the open sign of my business, you can find on my website, AdrianaRodriguezTherapy.com. And that's my therapy website. And so, yeah, but you can find me online. I'm there.
Awesome. I'm so excited. So if you have any more questions, Audrey is your girl. I'm so excited that you came on to share how your journey has evolved and progressed. And it's possible. It's possible to have your private practice if that's something that you really want to do. And so I'm excited that
it is
people to hear this.
Thank you so much for having me,
Audrey. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Be a Boss Coaching podcast. To connect with me and the other featured guests of this podcast, remember to come over to the show notes and visit us at beabosscoaching.com. Remember that you don't have to do this alone. If you have any self-doubt or uncertainties, there's so many places and communities and resources out there for you to tap into. You just need to take action. I can't wait to meet you, and I'll see you in the next episode.